So if we are marching today, because we are saying you will no longer use a non-constitutional thing to block our constitutional rights.
We are very grateful to welcome to the Chavis Chronicles the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. What's your message for communities that are facing the onslaught of voter suppression?
You know, Chavis, we are in a moment, and I've said it for a while, this is a battle against or the attempt to stop a third Reconstruction. And in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, we are saying, first of all, we got to be clear about what this battle is. It's a moral and constitutional battle. It's an attack not just on Black people, certainly racism is at the core and the center, but the collateral damage, and sometimes not even the collateral damage, the additional damage is that this voter suppression is going against anybody that votes in a progressive way. White people, poor white people, brown people, Asian people, Native people, young people, the disabled, and women. And we have to understand that because that's going to dictate how we fight back against it. And if we just make it binary, that it's just the GOP versus Black people, then we leave out the fact, no, because you got two Democratic senators that if they did the right thing, we could stop it tomorrow with federal legislation. You have the Supreme Court that's becoming a complicit. They are actually accessories to the crime of voter suppression. You have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that said to Sinema and Manchin, we support you in what you're doing on blocking the For the People Act. So that means we got to make the choice whether it's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or the U.S. Constitution. And then we have the memory of Dr. King, who said to us in '65, when he brought Muslims, Christians, Jews, and all different people together in Selma. At the end of that, he said, listen, the battle for voting rights is the battle for over the masses of Black people and the masses of poor, lower white people voting together to change the economic structure.
How do you see the current state of poverty in America?
So we've put together a third Reconstruction vision, which is now an actual bill in the Congress. It's a resolution that says, here's the resolve we have to have when it comes to measuring poverty, living wages, guaranteed income, child tax credits, health care for everyone, guaranteed housing. That has to happen. And the economists tell us, lastly, then, we do not have a lack of money. We do not have a lack of solutions. We have a lack of moral commitment.
Talk to us a little about the third Reconstruction and what does that mean?
And W.B. Du Bois talked about the first Reconstruction as being when poor and low-wealth Black and white people came together in the South and figured out they were both being played by the slave masters. And after the Civil War, they rewrote the constitutional laws. They put 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. They changed all the state constitutions and they changed voting. And they were actually moving the country forward. And then there was a violent backlash. And in some ways, that backlash came to its ultimate conclusion in December 10th, 1898 in Wilmington with the Wilmington Massacre. And I literally put duly elected people out of office and killed almost 3 to 5% of the city of Wilmington. That kind of ended the first Reconstruction. Then the second Reconstruction, as you said, the Civil Rights Movement, and all of the things that happened. But we need a third Reconstruction. But I want to lift up Du Bois. Du Bois said it must be a reconstruction first of the mind and of the policies. He said, and the Reconstruction, every Reconstruction, the people must decide to grab the things the nation has already said, but interpret them to their advantage. In other words, we already have a constitution that says this nation is supposed to establish justice, not just pray for justice, talk about it, establish it. What does that mean then for poor folk? It means you must establish a living wage. You must establish universal health care for everyone. And then he said it must be policy changes. So we say there's a third Reconstruction that's needed now because the first two were murdered. Let's always remember that. The first two Reconstructions were not, they didn't just quit. They were assassinated, killed, and murdered. We have now put together an entire agenda called the third Reconstruction, lifting from the bottom up, third Reconstruction, ending poverty, and low wealth by lifting from the bottom up. I want to invite your audience to go to the poorpeoplescampaign.org or to Repairs of the Breach and look at the 14 clear, vetted by some of the economists, best public health, best historians, that says if America is going to hold on to this democracy, these are the things we must fight for now, beginning with addressing racism and poverty in very structural ways.
After all that we have been through as a people, do we really have reason to have hope?
Well, brother, first of all, let me speak out of my personal life. You know, I was told I wouldn't walk again at 30, but you see me walking all the time. So I just don't believe that an answer is final. Secondly, a few weeks ago, we went to demand Manchin and McConnell meet with us, and they wouldn't. And it wasn't us, it was the people from their states, which lets me know they're more afraid than they are right. Because when you won't even meet with your own constituency. And we were led by a white woman named Pan Garrison from the hollers of Tennessee and a black woman from the hood of Charleston. When I see that and that kind of hook up, there's a lot of hope in that, Doc. And they said, we're not backing up. And they challenged, and they were the ones that led us in the street. You heard about Reverend Jackson and me, but really it was the people from Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee of all different races that went in the street. And more of us were arrested on June 23rd than on January 6th for praying and emoting. When I see young folk coming together, when we put out the call for this National Moral Monday season of nonviolent direct action, I mean, even the kids that did March for Lives, the gun, they have called now. People are saying, yes, we've been waiting. It's time to hook up. When I know that there's 65 million poor, low wealth voters in this country, and 34 million still haven't voted, and in 15 states, if just 1 to 22% of poor, low wealth people could be organized around an agenda and vote, they could determine who sits in the White House to say, that's why the suppression is going on. It's fear, man. It's the adversaries, they recognize that the demographics are against them, that there is a third Reconstruction already being birthed. They want to abort it. They want to stop it, right? They know they can't win. So we have to sometimes get hope from our adversaries. Your adversary would be fighting you this hard if you weren't powerful, if we didn't have the ability to change stuff. Then last two things, I get hope from knowing, and I sit down and talk with economists like Jeffrey Sachs and see what's happening in other countries. This stuff doesn't have to be, man. It doesn't have to exist. And lastly, Frederick Douglass. I spend time with Frederick Douglass mystically, like Howard Thurman. I just get real quiet and read and listen to him. And when the Dred Scott decision came down, they asked Frederick Douglass to speak. And 2 months later, and Frederick Douglass said, this is a monstrous decision. It looks like everything is lined up against us. And then he said this in 1857. He said, but there's another side. And there's a side to this that we have to look at. Every attempt to ally and stop the abolition movement has only served to embolden and intensify our agitation. If in this moment, we don't let it depress us, we let it embolden and intensify our agitation, eyes have not seen and ears have not yet heard, and it has not yet been spoken of what is possible. Particularly when we look at what people fought who had more to fight against than us, and they won. So we can't let those who had less than us do more than us.
We thank the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber for joining us on the Chavis Chronicles.
Thank you so much. Blessings always.